Truth, logic, action, power. It's the GreggHoush Show here on New Revolutionary Radio. From the Leonard School in Malden, Massachusetts, Gregg and company are here to bring a sense of ethics to your news. Whether it's politics, activism, or current events, we always seek to inform and never to deceive. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 61 of the GreggHoush Show. I am here with Mac and Anna.
Hey, everybody.
How's it going?
So, again, still no Kayla. One day. But for now, we are going to talk about the Corys. Not
not
Heyman Feldman. Not
you got me all excited for a second there.
Not our wonderful movie actors, but Cory Stewart, the GOP nominee for Tim Kaine's Virginia Senate seat, and Cory Booker, the guy who claims to be progressive and Democratic while being almost as far away from either of those as I could possibly imagine. But there you go, the Corys. So in this one, we've got Cory versus Cory.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting study we've got going on. I mean, you know, Cory Stewart would normally just be some minor nobody, having only ever been elected chairman of the board of supervisors for his county. But this year he's taken on a little extra relevance. I mean, he did run for the governor of Virginia back in 2016, but he didn't even win the nomination there. Came in second
to
Ed Gillespie. Yeah, and I mean, he'd normally be, you know, not super important because, well, he's not normally the kind of guy who would get anywhere. But in the era of Trump, him being the guy that boasts that he was Trump before Trump was Trump, now he has gotten the nomination for the GOP in the Virginia Senate race.
I feel like you should be a little more specific here because he's not saying, you know, he's a rich douchebag who doesn't deserve anything he has.
Well,
he's saying he's a Nazi.
Yes.
Before being a Nazi was cool.
The Nazi that, you know, sometimes occasionally tries to pretend to deny that they're... Look, they didn't know that guy was a Nazi when they endorsed him. Just because he said, I'm a Nazi and had a I am a Nazi t-shirt on does not mean that they in any way, shape, or form believed that he was a Nazi.
Yes, about Robert E. Lee, who we all might remember as the man who rose up in arms against the United States of America. He says, that man is a hero and an honorable man. That is a quote. These people who so deeply identify with the Confederate South still seem to not want to remember that these people took up arms against the United States of America, that they fought on the other side, not with our flag, but with their own.
And I mean, I have a lot of reasons why I could bring up that, you know, I don't think anyone should remember Robert E. Lee fondly, anywhere from the fact that, you know, he sued to overturn his father-in-law's will so that he could retain the slaves rather than freeing them as he was required under the terms of the will, and then violated the court decision there in order to keep the slaves even longer. Or we could talk about, you know, the time that he had some slaves that were returned to him after they'd made good their escape. And he personally ordered them whipped and then have salt rubbed in the wounds because, you know, he was that kind of guy. But, you know, let's forget for a minute that Robert E. Lee shouldn't be memorialized and just think that, like, let's pretend they had a claim that, you know, he was some sort of figure that we should listen to, because the thing that he did was when the South lost the war, he insisted all of his men put their uniforms down. They put their weapons down. He didn't want any memorials. The cause was lost. It was over. He was very, very explicit on that point.
Yes, he was.
So even if you want to treat him like someone that, you know, merits respect, then maybe you should listen to his view there because he was pretty clear on that point.
He was. And, you know, again, I just want to go back to this fact to make sure everyone heard. The South lost and again rose up in arms against the United States of America. They were not fighting for the United States of America. So all of you people who claim to be patriots of the United States of America should be very against those monuments.
Yeah, you would think, especially, you know, given that almost all of those monuments were put up between roughly 1920 and 1970, specifically in response to the civil rights movement, specifically to terrorize black people.
They are specifically monuments to racism. That's why people are defending them.
Yes.
So one of the more funny things about this Cory Stewart here is that he has said, quote, "Nothing is worse than a Yankee telling a Southerner that his monuments don't matter," end quote.
Which is absolutely hilarious.
Because
He is not, in fact, a Southerner. He was born in Duluth, Minnesota, and lived in Minnesota until he moved to Virginia after law school.
he is a Yankee.
He as Yankee as you get.
So, but obviously he has decided that he believes himself a Southerner. The wrong kind of Southerner.
Yes, the kind that tweeted out in January, "Make Mexico great again. Send Mexico back its hashtag DACA citizens. The establishment says they are talented, educated, and just want to work. Hashtag no DACA. Hashtag no DACA amnesty." He's that kind of Southerner, not the,
Hashtag my middle finger.
So as you can all expect, Trump has endorsed Stewart.
Of course, even though the rest of the Republicans were not real sure on this one, they're kind of backing away. But yeah, no, Trump tweeted out outright support for him. Of course,
That's the GOP nominee.
Well,
and
of course, Trump's supporting him, though, because isn't this the guy who was, big fan of all those Unite the Right idiots?
Yeah,
Yes.
he attended their pre-Unite the Right rally in February 2017 that was also in Charlottesville, that was organized by these exact same people, including the white supremacist Jason Kessler, who, he was real big on until it turned out that, people actually heard about what Kessler was up to, people got murdered, etc. And he went, "Whoa, I totally had no idea." Yeah, never mind. That guy was kind of a local celebrity and like everyone knew what he was up to. He'd kind of helped try to run an internet campaign to get a local black politician harassed out of office. Maybe people might have heard of him. It's kind of like how he also endorsed and was also endorsed by Paul Nehlen, the one that's running for Paul Ryan's seat.
the pro-white.
Yes, the very
Candidate.
pro-white.
In other words, racist.
Yes, he even called Paul Nehlen one of my personal heroes.
Was that before or after Nayland asked, why do we have Muslims in the country?
That was after.
That was after.
But I don't know how much of Paul Nehlen's time he spent talking about how pro-white he was at that point. So, later on when it became inconvenient, he was like, "Oh, he went nuts and started spewing a bunch of stupid stuff that wasn't really all that different from what he was already said."
Yeah. So that's the GOP side of the fight. And then we've got the establishment Democrats putting up Cory Booker.
Well, of course, he's the, senator from New Jersey and quite possibly one of the Democrats that might run in 2020. Certainly a lot of speculation on that count. And it's been very interesting because historically, he's been one of those ones that talks a good game, kind of like Obama uses very inspiring rhetoric about how we're going to change things. And then when you actually read his policies and what he's actually supported in the legislature, New Jersey, New York, and Illinois politicians often do, you get someone who's from a very blue state, but then when it comes down to it, doesn't seem to pursue all that much of what you'd think of as left-wing or liberal, especially liberal policy in a lot of regards.
Taking most of his money from big pharma and private equity and supporting both of them through every bit of legislation he can.
Right. Done all sorts of stuff. We talked previously about him, voting against the thing to allow importation of prescription drugs from Canada. And then he caught a bunch of shit for that and was like, "Oh, I had concerns about making sure that the drugs would be safe, that I'm totally in favor of the idea of importing the drugs from Canada, but this particular piece of legislation didn't address my concerns, so I couldn't support it." Mind you, that was a thing that failed 46 to 52 because 13 Democrats in the Senate decided not to support it. It turns out that whole thing about making sure the drugs are safe is literally the exact argument the pharmaceutical industry in the United States uses every time this topic comes up. And in fact, his opposition and concern there rings a little hollow given that he also voted for the 21st Century Cures Act, which shifted FDA approval process and priorities to focus on speed over accuracy and undermining the concerns about health and safety if it meant it was profitable enough. So he has actively worked to undermine drug safety standards himself. So, not really a very convincing argument given when it's also the argument the pharmaceutical companies themselves make.
Indeed. And then he's also worked with Betsy DeVos and friends on the school choice
policies.
He's
all in on that. He loves the charter schools, the merit-based pay for teachers,
bad
school
for
vouchers.
teachers, bad for children, bad for America, but good for billionaires who are profiting off of it.
Right. And I mean, he actually, didn't, he's famous for having gotten his political start as mayor of Newark, but didn't actually seem to do much for Newark in that time. In fact, doesn't seem to have done much of anything to improve the problems that Newark was facing. But he sounded good, talked about some actual issues, and just never seemed
Talked
to
a really good game.
address any of them. Now, the interesting thing is that now this guy who has long been sort of in that position and, has been very aligned with the establishment part of the party, this year he seems to have decided that maybe things are heading in a different direction and he needs to reestablish his credentials with
He needs to win over the Bernie Bros.
Yeah. So what he's done is he's unveiling a new bill that's actually a very interesting one. It's called the Worker Dividend Act, and it would mandate that companies that are doing stock buybacks of their own shares also have to pay out their own employees sum equal to the lesser of either the total value of the buyback or 50% of all of their profits beyond $250 million. Which is the reason it's especially interesting is because, well, first of all, addressing the stock buyback issue is not something the establishment wing of the Democratic Party has really done much about. They're usually relatively fine with things that end up concentrating wealth in the hands of the rich. They just want some occasional redistribution as well. So this is actually a more direct, making them compensate the employees directly. That's kind of a big thing from the establishment wing of the Democratic Party, especially given that this all comes on the heels of analysis of basically the Trump tax plan that showed that, out of the $54 billion corporate tax windfall, about $21.1 billion of that has gone to shareholders in the form of buybacks, which is almost twice as much as went to employees. And
a really good way of taking all that tax money out of the government's hands and giving it to only the rich.
Yes, because the rich overwhelmingly own essentially all the stock. Everyone else is just a rounding error.
Less than 15% of the U.S. population owns a single stock.
Yeah, and if you look at the actual concentration of how the stock is owned, the top 1% owns something like 60% of the stock.
Yeah. So again, the wonderful tax bill was really just another way for them to put as much money as they could back into the 1%. But this bill is interesting because one of its examples given here is that if Walmart were subject to this bill, its $4.1 billion worth of buybacks in 2016 would force it to offer $2,928 in bonuses to each of its 1.4 million employees. So basically, everyone employed at Walmart would have gotten a $3,000 bonus under this bill.
Now, we don't have, at least as of the time we were doing notes, we didn't have the full text of the bill. It had been previewed to one or two news sources, but all we had was reporting on it. So we don't know that the structure actually mandates that it would actually be, an equal amount to every employee or anything like that example. But at the very least, the idea that they're forcing that stock buyback to be tied to employee compensation as well is certainly a step forward from where we are.
Strongly.
Yes, and it's especially interesting that it's a very interesting contrast between these two candidates. On the one hand, the ascendant Trump wing of the Republican Party puts out just awful excuses for not even for good people. They're bad excuses for bad people even, and then this longtime corporate Democrat is starting to be like, oh, looks like the winds are maybe blowing a different direction here. Maybe it's time to get on the right side of things.
Right, but so now he's acting somewhat progressive on a bill that he knows won't pass.
Sure.
And definitely wouldn't be signed by the sitting president.
Sure.
So this is literally just him up there peacocking, attempting to get the Bernie supporters and get the progressives to pay attention. And what's worse is it's a way for him to show the Democratic establishment itself that he can win over some of the progressive wing if he can get some numbers of them to support him thanks to this bill, which would have them, thinking a little higher about his chances at running in 2020. And no matter what Trump has done until then, Cory Booker doesn't beat Trump. Cory Booker is a worse stud than Hillary, and there was no way Hillary could win anything.
I'm not sure that he's a worse stud than Hillary because unlike her, he's actually got the charisma when he's doing large group public speaking. I've seen him. I've seen
him talk too. He looks good up there. It's very much like Obama talking. But
and
there's far stronger attacks against him than there were against Obama.
Sure, I agree with that.
The attacks against Obama were birther attacks. They were racist attacks. They were Muslim attacks.
Absolutely.
There weren't many legislative attacks you could do against him. One of the reasons being that he wasn't there that long before he made the jump.
State senator for a little bit,
but he went pretty quick. But Booker, there are a lot of ways to attack Booker, and most of them true.
Yes,
and that's where I see him as more problematic even than her.
I see him as he has a lot of the same weaknesses that she did, but the difference is that I think he has the personal charisma for when dealing with large groups as opposed to small groups, which is where she seems to excel. That I think he could actually overcome that weakness simply because, quite frankly, I think that the American public responds more to charisma than they do any sort of fact-based or policy.
You're not wrong.
If the progressives go for him, it'll just prove again just how much the right thinks they're stupid. He is not progressive. Nothing he has done is progressive. He works only for the billionaires. He has proven that multiple times.
I think he works for himself, and he sees the billionaires as the best way to promote that end.
That's a way to look at it. Both sides of the same coin. In the end, he works for the billionaires.
Yes.
If he's self-serving doing it, that's fine. But his policies, the things he votes for, and the things he actually has gotten done so far have done nothing but help the establishment and the rich get richer. He is not a progressive.
No
amount of lip service from him will make him a progressive.
Nope.
And if the progressives fall for him, they will deserve what they get.
While I don't disagree with any of that, the fact that they're seeing attracting the progressives and making even these sorts of weak gestures to reach out, supporting a progressive policy initiative on their own free will, like out of nowhere, even if it's one that they're saying, we're supporting it right now because we know it can't pass, won't pass. And, if it could pass, then we wouldn't be putting it up in the first place. Sure, that's true. But the fact that they're seeing that as a winning strategy in the first place means that they're, starting to do, at least to some degree, the thing the Republicans do with the far right, where they don't necessarily wholeheartedly adopt it, but man, they'll use the rhetoric, they'll use the ideas, and they'll just take the little bits, and then they get like the thing that the far right wanted passed in the long run, even though they didn't actually care about any of the ideology, just because it was a convenient club to beat someone over the head with to achieve, enriching the rich.
But so now the Democrats will start playing some lip service to the progressives, mostly out of fear that wing of their party is getting so large that at some point, if they stop going along with the establishment dies.
I don't care if they're doing it out of fear of the goodness of their hearts. I care that the window's moving slightly to the left again.
Exactly.
Which I don't believe it will. I believe they will with their current still overwhelming power over that group of people and sheer power over the establishment. They will simply play lip service, convince enough of them to vote their way that they don't actually have to do anything for them. We have seen the DCCC, we have seen the DNC, we know how they act. And currently, a person who actually probably under their own charters broke the law and definitely broke the rules of that. Debbie Wasserman Schultz looks like she's going to take over the chair of the DNC again. after this guy goes away. She's currently the front runner in behind closed doors meetings to take it over. And that will be more than enough proof to the progressives that they don't actually care.
Sure. But the thing is, if you have the Democrats even just giving that lip service to the ideas, as long as it's the political leadership, those ideas are going to become more accepted among the populace as a whole because, well, credible people they perceive as credible are talking about them supportively. It means that the left wing doesn't spend. It isn't essentially just relegated to out in the wilderness with no one listening. And like, as soon as you mention any sort of vaguely left-wing policy, everyone just immediately dismisses you as a crank, which is what happened to them for like 35 years from roughly, the time of McGovern's loss until today.
I mean, people, a lot of them will default to being centrists. Like, oh, well, there's a bunch of sides on the issue and the truth is somewhere in the middle. So if you have even politicians who are just doing lip service and don't actually intend to pass shit, saying these super leftist things, then you are going to shift the public view closer to where the actual middle is because it's been shoved way over to the right by all these Nazi fucks. So it is a positive.
Yeah, it's not great in terms of like immediate outlook for our political system, but I would call it, a healthy trend over the longer term. At least in regards to society as a whole.
I mean, it may not save us in time.
Oh, yeah, no, it absolutely may not be enough by any means.
Feels more like the wonderful business tactic of embrace, extend, extinguish, personally, which is a very well-studied thing and has its own Wikipedia page. But it feels very much to me like they are going to bring people in, dumb down their views, get them more aligned with the establishment, only do the establishment stuff like they were going to do anyways. I have no faith in the DNC or the DCCC anymore. It's done. I am literally done with them.
Oh,
I had, if we're talking 100% faith versus none, I was still at 1%. There was the lightest glimmer of hope. And then I heard the news that Wasserman Schultz might actually be in the running for leadership again, and I was done. I'm near ready for pitchforks at that point.
I mean, the only way that you fix this thing, it's not by yelling at them from the outside. It's,
burning down their houses?
It's not burning down their houses.
You say that.
We don't publicly advocate for arson. No, it's doing the uncomfortable thing and going to the stupid meetings and becoming a delegate and doing all this bullshit. So there's one more voice, and if you get enough people, you shove them a little bit further. It's boring and stupid, and everybody hates it.
30 years from now, they'll be moved an inch to the left.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not enough at this point. We don't have that time.
You have to take the long view, or you
do, but they didn't, and they didn't do it for too long. If they had started that 20 years ago, we'd have time. I don't believe we do at this point. The Republicans have a 30-year lead on them, and it's too far gone.
I don't know.
Trump won the presidency. You have to understand how far gone this is.
That still hurts every time somebody says it.
Right?
You have to understand how far gone this country is if that's true. The Democrats let this happen. The Republicans won nothing. The Republicans did nothing special. The Democrats gave up on local. On purpose, pulled out of local. That was their choice, and it was an active choice. It wasn't just neglect. They literally chose to do it. This is fact. You can look it up. All of their decisions and minutes from the meetings even are public from where they made these decisions. It is like the Republicans didn't do anything special. They aren't geniuses here. There was no massive political win.
Everyone should have been able to predict that they were not geniuses.
The Democrats handed this to them on a silver platter. And if they'd even let it go for 10 years, there's room to bring it back. It has been 30. I have lost my faith in the ability of the Democrats themselves to do it. And I really hope the progressives in that, side of the fight don't fall for this wonderful embracing that seems to be starting. And I hope they fight hard, and I hope they split the party.
I mean, I hope that they just...
Are you hoping they split the party because you're hoping ranked choice voting becomes an actual thing? Because otherwise, you're just hoping that the country burns down.
I don't want the country to burn down, but if the people rise up, I will be on the front lines.
You're so much trouble.
So, We'll see. I mean, good old establishment versus Nazi, it looks like, is what's going to happen there.
Yeah, I mean,
Cory versus Cory.
yeah, we'll see which of those wings of their respective parties manages to keep some power, and hopefully it's neither.
I wish Haim was still alive so they could, they could play each of them.
Ah, yeah.
So, yeah, so we'll see on that one. Now we're on to, something we just mentioned. Ranked choice voting is a wonderful thing and should be adopted everywhere for every election. It is, there are many versions of it. There's instant runoff. There's multiple just ranked choice voting kind of formulas, but there is a very clear, in my mind, winner of how ranked choice voting actually works. And it is actually the version that was voted in 2016 in Maine, and then fought by the Republicans because they don't want people to have choice. They don't want people to be able to actually elect who they want elected. They were using the horrible old electoral system there to win without majorities because of just how that wonderful system works with the whole two-party system and forcing the third-party votes not to matter. With ranked choice voting, the third parties actually get a shot at it while still not hurting the candidate that you might want second.
Everybody's favorite example for this is looking at the 2016 presidential election. You could have potentially, if there was ranked choice voting, voted Bernie number 1, Hillary number 2, and Trump number 3. So that way you could have voted for Bernie, but if Bernie didn't have anywhere near enough votes to become president, then your vote would switch to being for Hillary instead.
And that would have put her in the White House, which, I mean, maybe it's better. I don't know.
But the more important possibility there is that all those people that, voted for Hillary and were really anti-Trump might have had Bernie as their second. And some of the Trump people would have been like, I would totally take Bernie over Hillary. And then it turns out that everyone ultimately ended up being more okay with Bernie than on average than everyone else. And we ended up with him as president. So
basically it empowers third party type of candidates. It's really interesting, from the independents to even the Greens and others that, people kind of only vote for in 1% and 2% at this point. But it means voting for those third-party candidates doesn't hurt the two parties like it does right now. So they're not going to fight against it that hard, which gives third parties a chance to at least exist and flourish a little. And that's important for our democracy. This two-party system is a virus. It is destroying our democracy and our republic. We need ranked choice voting. We need it on a nationwide level. And we need to get it first in states. And so Maine got it, and then the Republicans went nuts and have been fighting. So it ended up coming to another referendum, a question on the ballot where the people could vote again, and that happened.
The process for this is super cool. The Maine legislature decided, this thing isn't legal according to our constitution, we're going to kick it out. Yep. But Maine has this really neat thing where they can do a people's veto, where if they get enough signatures, they can put something on the ballot to tell their legislator to, go eat a dick. And they managed to get enough signatures to get it on the ballot. And they
basically voted it through again and said, no, we want this and you're going to make it happen. You can't get rid of ranked choice voting. We want it.
Oh, it was even better than that, because it was originally like they passed it via the initial ballot proposition, and then the thing the legislature did to try and screw with it was they voted on a bill that would delay implementation and for all races until 2021, because there was a issue with the constitutionality of the governor's race being decided, and this because of the phrasing of the Maine state constitution. But it was already okay for all the other races. So, but they were like, all right, we're gonna delay implementation until 2021 for all races. Oh, by the way, if we don't fix the Constitution in time for that, the whole thing goes away. We're just gonna undo the whole thing, which just gives them all the reason in the world to never
not
pursue
do the work to fix it.
So then it goes to this people's veto, where they basically just went, yes or no, fuck the legislature, ranked choice voting anyway. And it actually won by a larger margin than the original ranked choice voting thing in the first place.
So the people of Maine have now voted in ranked choice voting basically twice.
Yes.
And twice slapped their legislators in the face for trying to stop it. And we need everyone else to be doing that. It's a really good thing. Plus, I mean, the only thing giving me hope for our democracy right now is stuff like this. In Massachusetts, it's made it to the platform thanks to the Ranked Choice MA group, the Voters' Choice MA group, run by Adam Freeman. And
I gotta tell you, like when we were at the convention,
Yep.
those people were really well put together. They had folks everywhere. There was somebody joking like, "Oh, I was trying to get you, but I had to get through the ranked choice voting gauntlet because like
they're everywhere.
The organization is fantastic. They're doing a great job. The people in Massachusetts were helping doing phone banking for Maine and everything else. These people are really serious about it. And one of our candidates for Secretary of State is pro ranked choice voting, and our other one's like, I don't know, after he's been asked like a million times. Like literally he was asked 7 times and still said the I don't know answer. So one of the people we've been talking to, we're hoping to get on the show soon, actually works on trying to improve voting structure in general. And one of the things that she's always saying is you have to pay attention to your secretaries of state because these are the people who, can make it really easy for ranked choice voting and automatic voter registration, all these other things to get through, or they can make it a nightmare.
It's true. I mean, just remember Chris Kobach, the voter fraud commission chair that Trump brought in, was the former Secretary of State for Kansas, right?
Yeah. So, ranked choice voting. If there is an initiative in your state, please join on. If there is not, I would say looking at Maine's example is great. I would say looking at Voters' Choice MA, I believe it's voterschoicema.org. They have a lot of material there you can use. I would say if you want even more information, more in-depth, really deeper understanding of all the versions that exist of this, maybe there's something more specific to your area. Fair Vote, which is the organization that's actually been working for this type of a voting system since the early 90s. They came about during MTV's wonderful kick for pushing for the vote. And that lasted for all of a couple of years, I think. They decided to give up on that one. But
Too busy throwing house parties and...
But yeah, you try and get with the ranked choice voting people in your area. Find out if they exist. If they don't, maybe put them together.
The ranked choice voting person.
Here in Massachusetts, if you happen to be here, look up Voters' Choice MA. They always need volunteers. They always need help. They need donations. They are a nonprofit. So Voters' Choice, ranked choice voting in Maine was pushed through a second time by the people. Hopefully the legislation takes this one and doesn't find another way to stop it.
It's so crazy to me that Maine is taking the lead of all the states, really.
Yeah,
Maine.
We need ranked choice voting in every state, and we need the national popular vote to count. I don't care what state does what. I don't care where the population of a state. The entire United States, take a vote. Whoever wins wins. The Electoral College be damned. It is controlled by the elites. The primaries and caucuses are controlled by the elites. They are tools of the 1% to keep themselves in power. The Democrats do it worse in that instance than the Republicans. The Republicans are a little more fair in the way their caucus system works, but the Democrats with their superdelegates are just outright rigging the system. They can choose whoever they want whenever they want. Ranked choice voting, national popular vote. For the ranked choice voting, obviously, that's a state-by-state issue. For the national popular vote, the interstate compact is getting very close to actually becoming a thing.
How many are they up to?
They basically need Texas to sign on, and they've passed the threshold. And it is coming to vote in Texas's legislature this fall, I believe.
All right. Well, I never thought I'd be rooting for Texas, but here I am rooting for Texas.
So look up the interstate compact on national popular vote, because that is a really interesting sideways way to get that enforced.
Yeah.
Good times. So now, of course, we go to the border, since we're talking about Texas anyways, right?
Oh, boy.
It's down there on that border.
We were getting so hopeful. Let's just be really depressed again.
Well, obviously. I mean...
So the Trump administration, of course, under Sessions has been basically forcing the splitting of children from their parents at the border and calling it a criminal act. So the parents have to be prosecuted for their crime, which is just a misdemeanor, but taking them away from the kids and then putting the kids somewhere else. The kids have been located, some of them in Brownsville, Texas, in an old Walmart where people weren't even allowed to go in. And
They actually turned away a U.S. senator.
they turned away a U.S. senator
they
at
turned
the
away
door.
Jeff Merkley, who I actually
Right?
met. I hugged that man. It's a true story. He is fantastic.
And
I'm so happy that he's doing this work, but I'm so sad it
they
needs to be
finally
done.
let reporters in, which is a miracle in itself. But you know, this law is a law that has been around. It was there under Obama. He did not do anything to stop it coming into power or to fix it, which he had every opportunity to, and so did the Democrats in power. So I'm not going to blame this one entirely on Trump, although Trump's office and his good friend Sessions there, they are enforcing it and enforcing it strongly.
Yeah, it was a policy that definitely, it may not have entirely started with the Trump administration, but boy, they just took everything to a whole new level. It definitely was not anything like this scale with this specific issue. In fact, this particular old Walmart in Brownsville, Texas, now labeled Casa Padre, is housing currently more than 1,400 immigrant boys, dozens of whom were separated forcibly from their parents at the border by the new zero tolerance policy. And they're staying there for an average of 49 days. And, you know, that's an average. So on average, a month and a half, and some of them much longer than that. And these are kids, and for all practical purposes, they're in prison. They're living in an old Walmart.
This whole thing just reeks of dystopian nightmare. Like the murals on the wall are the creepiest thing.
It reeks of dystopian nightmare before you hear about the murals, where it's this weird stencil art of Donald Trump in front of an American flag above a White House, and it's got English and Spanish text with a quote that originates from The Art of the Deal, but which Trump then repeated in a 2014 tweet. And it's, quote, "Sometimes by losing a battle, you find a new way to win the war." And that text is in English and Spanish there. Now, if that weren't creepy enough in its own right, now here's the context in which that quote comes from. It's referencing Trump's failed attempt to evict tenants from their homes in 1985.
Wasn't that shut down because it was super hella racist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just thinking of this like from a narrative standpoint, like a movie standpoint, like if you make that mural as part of your set dressing, like
the audience is going to be like, look, come on, use a less subtle hammer on us.
No, it's just like, you should see that in Act 1, and in Act 3, the kids are throwing Molotov cocktails at that thing. Like that's what it's for.
That one is so ham-handed that the only possible explanation is this is Paul Verhoeven's movie. Like,
we were in the wrong timeline.
I don't know what this is his idea of a parody of, but I assume that, like Starship Troopers, it started out as a completely unrelated movie, and at some point they just noticed that there were a couple of plot points that are similar and bought up the license to the property.
It is going to take legislation to fix this, and it is going to take the Republicans losing majorities in everything for this to even be slightly addressed. So remember that when you're voting in the midterms there, because the Republicans definitely aren't going to get rid of this problem.
Vote in your primaries to get rid of the establishment Dems who aren't doing what you want, and vote in the actual election to get rid of these. It's bad when like Paul Ryan is even like, what the fuck are we doing here?
Right?
Like,
even
that's
like,
just
the point at which
Paul Ryan is saying this is too far, guys. We need to be less creepy and evil.
Right? I have so much wrong. There's so much wrong that when we're at that point.
So Now we have all these kids basically in jail. We're waiting for them to get reunited, obviously on the parents' way out, maybe. Who knows?
Hey, but they get to make 2 phone calls a week, even if it does sometimes take days or weeks for them to be able to reach their parents. Also, they get a whole 2 hours outside each day.
A whole 2 hours? That sounds like jail.
What?
That
But
sounds
one of-
like when
one of-
you're being punished while you're in
One
jail.
of those hours is dedicated to physical exercise in the yard. I mean, on the property.
Yeah, about that.
The other one they can spend doing whatever they want.
Like kicking the dirt.
Wait. This sounds suspiciously like the things I've heard from people I've talked to that spent time in jail. It sounds like it's exactly the schedule that they follow.
Yeah, pretty much. I got to watch that firsthand. So now we just wait. You need to work in the elections to actually vote these people out if you're going to actually care about this. You can sit there all day long and be upset and won't anybody think of the children, but nothing's going to change with the people currently in power. So you're going to have to vote them out.
It's also not just about the people that are currently the legislators, because remember that law enforcement and the courts are going to be ultimately the ones making sure this isn't happening. And as long as those people are being put on by the same assholes that are allowing this to happen now, nothing is getting fixed. That's how we end up with people like Joe Arpaio.
That's why you have to make sure that you're voting not just for your legislators, but also paying attention to your sheriff races. Most sheriffs are elected positions. DA races are super important. And the governor's council, which is how you control who ends up becoming a judge in your state. And judges matter a lot. Like having a bench stacked with really good judges dramatically changes the way, a region works.
Absolutely. And, also keep that in mind when it comes to participating, even if you don't like your legislature options particularly, remember those are people that are going to be, confirming judges and a lot of other things like that. And that is a important factor in what they're doing. And even if they're individually crappy, like having people that are at least kind of supportive of it, like at least not actively the wrong direction there, makes it possible to hopefully address some of this. Whereas, with these assholes that we've got currently, there's zero chance that they're going to do anything about it.
Yeah. I was actually at an event earlier today where people were doing the come on, won't somebody think of the children? It was actually really good turnout for like the woman who organized this. This was her first time organizing a protest. And everybody in this room has been at that sort of seat of your pants first protest thing. So she did really great under the circumstances. But one of the things that people in Massachusetts are trying to do to protect immigrants who are here, the Safe Communities Act didn't go through on its own, but there's some amendments to the budget that are going through. And it's just the process of getting protections in place for people is insane because the way anything works at any state house, I'm sure Massachusetts is not unique here. You try to do things the right way, and then somebody does some bullshit procedural nonsense, and then you pull some bullshit procedural nonsense, and it goes back and forth. And by the time you're at a point where people need to actually be making decisions, most of the public has completely tuned out because they can't keep up with whatever nonsense is going on up there. But you got to stay on it.
And I mean, honestly, a lot of the time, from the perspective of politicians, that is a feature, not a bug.
Oh, yeah.
They want it to just be able to kick it back and forth until everyone stops paying attention.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Speaker DeLeo just wants to sort of sit there and collect a paycheck. I don't think he's actually here to do shit.
All too common a problem.
Yep.
So work on your local elections and do what you can there. Now, this just in, 2 days after a judge rules that AT&T taking over Time Warner in a complete acquisition does not violate antitrust, it's gone through. It took them 2 days. They have completed the acquisition as of tonight. It is over. Time Warner, which includes all kinds of properties, including a complete actual cable system. So like in Texas, you can get Time Warner instead of Comcast. And includes HBO, includes Turner Broadcasting Network, and includes CNN, which funny enough was the alert I got telling me about this. is now all outright owned by AT&T, who also now own DirecTV. So they now own a satellite provider and a home cable provider, and both internet providers and content creators in every space, from movies to private paid for subscription service drama, to actual just regular old home-based, over-the-air television, to basic cable television, and to your news networks,
But
all owned by AT&T.
Technically, within the borders of the United States, they have competitors in every one of those fields, so they aren't really engaging in antitrust actions.
Right.
Just like, Standard Oil actually
Sure.
had, there were companies competing with them, and therefore nothing Standard Oil did could ever be considered antitrust.
So we have more media consolidation. I'm waiting for the day that AT&T or Comcast buy Sinclair. And then we will be down to basically 3 or 4 majors. And by the end, we're going to end up with a Comcast versus AT&T going on here, because Comcast already own NBC Universal and all of that, plus the distribution networks. So you look at all the sports content, all of the news content from the NBC brands, and all of the distribution from Comcast. And then you look over at Verizon, who now own not only all the distribution networks, all the phone networks, all the content creation, because not only did they have their own networks already, but when they bought out Yahoo, they also bought up Oath, Riot, and a bunch of other production firms that were content creating. So we are very quickly going to end up with 3 media companies owning all the distribution, be it fiber, cable, or satellite, and all of the creation, be it internet-based, private subscription-based, cable, or over-the-air. All of it will be owned by 3 companies.
Well, I mean, we still have network neutrality policies in place, so clearly it can't be that. Oh, wait. It seems my notes were out of date. We don't have net neutrality anymore.
Oh, Mac.
So yeah, there we go. As always, we march towards our dystopian future with one media overlord in control of all propaganda.
I did see a good meme the other day. It's like, the best thing about this dystopian nightmare is that we're getting all of the dystopian nightmares.
It's
we aren't
true.
just getting one of them. We're getting all of them. My favorite one is the part where Domino's is now fixing potholes and putting advertising where
Yeah,
they fixed
that-
potholes.
Although I liked that I then
So-
saw that used by libertarians in memes, like, so who's going to repair the roads, right? And then they have like pictures, unclear on the difference between what it takes to actually, obtain all the property needed to build a road in the first place and actually do all the engineering work and do all that to build the road.
There's a difference
and
between patching
filling
a
it with
pothole.
filling a hole with a bucket of hot asphalt.
So everyone should be aware that this is not some genius play for advertising by Domino's. While it is an advertising play, they are second to do this. KFC did this years ago on a much greater scale across
Yeah,
many
but nobody likes KFC.
cities. So it was... It's an already played game, although it is funny watching them put local cities to shame by fixing things that those cities should have fixed. But at the same time, do you want to live in a world where your pizza delivery company has to fix the roads that they're delivering the pizza on so their cars stop getting destroyed?
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw this out there. The cities might actually fix all the potholes if the companies were paying a proper tax to the city so they can have a budget.
Indeed.
Yeah. That's about how that goes.
So yay, media consolidation. Here comes more of it. So now, let's talk about Trump, Russia, and all the fun stuff there.
It's actually, for all the stuff that happened this week, that particular topic was relatively quiet. We only got a little bit, and most of that was just about how screwed Michael Cohen is.
Yeah, I mean, we've ended up with Michael Cohen's law firm basically quitting.
Yeah, it sounds like...
So Trump's lawyers leave. Trump's lawyer, who is now facing obvious indictments or possibly working with the council to not get indicted anymore anyways, His lawyer now leaves, and now Trump's distancing himself from this guy.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really dumb move because you're just going to convince him to cooperate outright.
The guy that we already know is famous for recording conversations with people and has been Trump's fixer for decades, and therefore would have intimate knowledge of all of his money laundering and other such deals that he unquestionably has.
One of my favorite article titles today came from actually The Onion.
Oh, yeah.
But it was only because for a second there it was believable. And The Onion's title was basically Donald Trump's lawyers seek to discredit Michael Cohen by showing the world all of the times that Michael Cohen did illegal things for the president, proving obviously he is not trustworthy.
Yes, that
does sound like a move they'd pull.
I mean, they're already like, they've been halfway there. They just haven't like gone the full length to the like, he's not trustworthy because the crimes he committed were for Donald Trump.
Yes, of course.
They haven't gone that part. They've pretty much done all of the other like independent legs of that already. They just haven't tied it all together, which I assume is only a few months away at this point.
So we also heard another part of an interesting conversation from the G7 where Trump explained to other people at the G7 that the Crimea was Russian because they speak Russian. And so that's just how that goes. Now, being in that room, I would have thought, that we would also hear some kind of a wonderful rebuttal because, his love of New York and especially Manhattan and the whole area, the correct response to that is, so Spanish Harlem belongs to Spain? Is that what I'm hearing here? Because we'll give it back to him. You guys just look the other way for a minute because that's what you did over in the Ukraine.
It's true. And I mean, it turns out that like, well, you might have expected that surely nothing else he said at the G7 could possibly have been anywhere near as bad as saying that, Crimea is obviously Russian because everyone there speaks Russian, which, not 100% true. And we're not going to go into all the reasons it's such a dumb thing to say because there's a long, long list. But it turns out that he actually said something almost as awful and maybe actually meant it as a compliment because we found out that Jean-Claude Juncker, the former premier of Luxembourg, who's the current president of the European Commission, says that at G7, quote, Trump told me last week, Jean-Claude, you are a brutal killer. It is the first time Luxembourg has become such a danger to the United States. I think he meant as a compliment, but I'm not sure.
He also said at the G7, quote, Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Now, I will state that it is in that specific state of disrepair thanks to people like Paul Manafort.
Yeah, very specifically.
And Vladimir Putin.
100% wrong that there's a lot of problems with corruption.
It's just
there
all of his friends who did
the
it.
reason.
So he might be able to state that because he has so much intimate knowledge of it.
It's even worse because the statement about Ukraine being one of the most corrupt countries in the world was made apparently in the context of him apparently questioning why the G7 leaders were siding with Ukraine over Russia. And like the people that were there weren't sure whether that was a joke or if that was him being like, oh, by the way, all of U.S. foreign policy up till now out the window.
Yeah, because we were on Ukraine's side for all of it.
And, the fact that the U.S. supported kicking Russia out of what was G8 over that and all of these things. And now Trump is apparently like, oh, well, why aren't we just siding with Russia?
Indeed. So then we get down to more fun with more billionaires. And we've got Tom Barak. And he is, of course, best friends with all the Arab princes and kings and being a billionaire, he just plays in that crowd, but
and
specifically Saudi Arabia and the Emirates.
Specifically a friend of Donald Trump's.
Of course, because he's a rich friend to the Saudis and the Emirates, he would be friends with Trump as well.
Yes.
And he was actually the person who recommended that Trump bring on Paul Manafort as campaign manager. And then worked with the UAE ambassador, Yusuf Al-Otaiba, in getting him closer to not only Trump, but specifically to Jared Kushner to get to Trump.
Yeah, we now have all these emails that they were exchanging in like 2016, where he was talking about how he was going to introduce Kushner to Alo Taiba and said, you'll love him and he agrees with our agenda. And then like a month later, he's like, I'd like to align in Donald Trump's mind the connection between the UAE and Saudi Arabia, which we already started with Jared. I think it's important that you be the center pen. And then like later on, he's talking about how like, yeah, we're totally in and like we got Paul's help on this and we're going to be doing this. And this is all like communications with the actual ambassador to the UAE, all while Donald Trump was still a candidate before he won the election. This included things like they scheduled a meeting at one point to to get people introduced and all of that. And then the day after the meeting was scheduled, Tom Barak sent a forward to the ambassador with a message from Paul Manafort with a clarification that Trump's call for a Muslim ban. Don't worry, like nudge, nudge, wink, wink. He doesn't really mean that. And just like all of these emails just show this behind the scenes communication between them the whole time, through and including after the election.
And they specifically show people in serious positions of power around the world working for other government interests, very much foreign interests, working to get Paul Manafort into Trump's campaign to then use Manafort to manipulate Jared and Trump for their own interests.
Well, nothing burger.
Yes, obviously a nothing burger. Also, speaking of extra patties on your nothing burger, when it comes to Michael Cohen, we got some more background on. Remember that peace plan that he and Felix Sater were bringing to Michael Flynn back in January 2017? That
I can't remember anything.
Briefly made it into the news, even though it was a peace plan for Russia being brought to the president's national security advisor by a back channel from Russia, but weirdly didn't stay in the news for all that long. Well, now we know a bit more because it turns out that, Andrei Artemenko, former Ukrainian MP, was the one that brought the peace plan to Cohen and Sater in the first place. Well, we got some more background details because, first of all, he was testifying to the special counsel and such. And also, though, an associate of his, a disgraced former U.S. representative, Kurt Weldon of Pennsylvania, was kind of involved. Interestingly, Weldon lost his re-election campaign back in the mid-2000s after a FBI probe into his ties to two Russian companies. Turns out he was kind of super dirty. What a coincidence, right?
Somebody associated with the Trump campaign is super dirty?
Oh, but he wasn't even associated with the Trump campaign. He was associated with the Ukrainian MP that brought the plan to the Trump campaign.
No, I can't.
What a coincidence that a Republican legislator just happened to have those ties.
We have this whole big wall here. We need to just get a blackboard on there and like start doing the string because I can't keep up with this.
And then get a padded room so that they can like take the pictures and be like, see, we have all the evidence these people are crazy.
I can't keep up with this. Nobody can keep up with this.
No,
I'm
it's
surprised
impossible.
you managed to do these notes every week because like every week it's just more and more nonsense and you have to remember something that happened 9 months ago.
Oh, absolutely.
To make any sense of it.
So yeah, but okay. So in this case, what we found out was thanks to Weldon talking to some people and some things that we heard from Artemenko telling people, the peace plan started actually getting discussed in early 2016. So, like a year before the election. And then
they had some thoughts on who was going to win that one.
Yeah, it's almost like they may have suspected. But then also when Weldon, when the New York Times published an article about the meeting between Cohen and Artemenko, people that were close to him say that Weldon was furious about this. He was saying that, they were so close to having that deal worked out. Like, they were so mad that it became public. And actually, one of these people that was apparently in the conversation with Weldon says that he said that he and Artemenko had already secured funding for the promotion of the plan from Victor Vekselberg's fund in New York City, which you may recall that we were talking about Victor Vekselberg just last week and like the last 3 weeks before that because of all of the stuff with the payments to Cohen there through his American subsidiary.
It is a wonderful, wonderful group of people in a wonderful, wonderful web. And I believe Mueller has untangled most of it and will continue to untangle it.
I bet you he has a wall with some string on it.
Yeah. He definitely has the Glenn Beck thing going on at this point.
Okay, can we stop with Russia and start with like bad propaganda and basketball stars trying on TV? Because that's...
So at this point, we now know that Dennis Rodman gave Kim Jong-un a copy of Trump's The Art of the Deal. We also know, of course, because it's just fact, that Trump did not even write this book. It was ghostwritten.
Had almost nothing to do with the writing thereof.
Had some edits afterward, but again, those weren't his edits either. He had other people read it and give some ideas for edits.
Yes.
It now can be said to be pretty clear that Rodman is actually very central to this meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un actually happening. And we live in a world of basketball diplomacy. That is the timeline you find yourselves on, people. If you believe in the multiverse, we have not won the lottery. We are in the wrong one. But here we are. So Rodman goes to North Korea, and in his own words, he did not know what he was stepping into. He says that he was going because he had been invited and he had been to so many charity events in other countries that he thought nothing of it. He was a sports player, he was a basketball player, and he never paid attention to much politics. So he did not look into the politics of the country he was going to. He merely thought, oh, look, it's another charity basketball event somewhere in the world. I'll get on that plane. Great. I can believe that. I have watched Rodman for many years. In fact, I lived in Chicago for, the ending of his career there. And although he moved around a little after that, still, the ending of his Chicago career. And I can believe that that is exactly where he was in his head. That does not sound like a lie to me. But
I can believe that he is an example of someone who simply had no idea of what he was doing.
Exactly. So he comes back. And on his way back to America, he ends up with an inordinate amount of death threats from people who believe that he has done a very unpatriotic thing, is propping up a horrible dictator. And I believe both those things to be true, although neither of them death threat worthy. But after the strength of the response to what he did, he decided to look a little into it and decided to go back. This time with a team of ex-NBA and ex-college basketball stars to throw a basketball game, which Kim Jong-un had asked him for. And Rodman says he did this with the hopes to foster a little more dialogue and to make a little stronger friends, because he thought there were possibilities here for his now good friend Kim Jong-un to maybe stop being as bad as he was and maybe talk to, America about things, because he had actually paid some attention and started listening to how bad things were. He still did not believe that Kim Jong-un was as bad as some people did, but he does actually say that maybe he was wrong there. So he's a little unrepentant on just how ignorant he was of the subject. But in the end, we end up with Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un meeting. And that, of course, is weird for many reasons. The Trump people will tell you that it is amazing because finally a president got to meet with North Korea's leader, although many other presidents had the opportunity, including ex-presidents. Carter had already met with them. And Barack Obama had every chance to meet with them and could have set that up at any point.
In fact, pretty much every president for the last 50 years has had the conversation of should we actually have this meeting.
So they have all decided not to have the meeting, believing that having that meeting would give the regime in North Korea some legitimacy. It would give them this air of thinking that they are on the same level as everyone else and possibly giving them some propaganda wins, showing their flags next to ours at the same levels, that all of this was problematic. That's true. Trump definitely gave them some big propaganda wins.
Seriously,
What's funnier is he didn't just give them the propaganda wins of allowing them to be there, shaking hands with the U.S. president, putting their flag on the same level. No. He also actually created the propaganda video for them that they get to go show the rest of the world.
It is the most ridiculous thing I have seen in my life. It is amazing. It's like somebody ingested every bad trope from 90s movie trailers and watched a dozen Scientology videos, and they were like, this is exactly what we want.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is like someone spent 100 consecutive hours binging North Korean propaganda while on acid, and then decided, hey, I could write this.
It's it's stock footage. It's B-roll, and then, hey, here's some B-roll of the president, some B-roll of Kim Jong-un, and two leaders
Hey, you are giving it entirely too much credit because it's way creepier, more disturbing, and fawning over both of them than you are describing.
I'm so mad about this thing. At one point, they're talking about how great it's going to be to reunite the continent, and it's two leaders, and this is literally the handshake where Kim Jong-un is shaking hands with, I am forgetting his name. Help me, Mac, please.
Moon?
Yeah.
Moon, yes. And they highlight the handshake, but they make sure to light it so only Kim Jong-un is getting the lighting, and Moon is completely in shadow. And then it's two leaders.
Moon.
No, not Moon.
No, it was
They leave Moon out.
Oh,
It's Trump
yeah.
and Un.
and Kim Jong-un. And what are you? Everything about this is so bad.
Also, it's got
so
all this
bad.
footage where they're footage of North Korea and cultural events there, and then CGI of a gleaming golden city in the sunrise, and
just B-roll of space and a happy person in a field and technology. I don't know. What do we do for technology? Let's just look through the free stock sites. I'm positive a bunch of that stuff is just ripped off of.
oh yeah,
It's so bad. It's so bad, guys. You have to watch it. And the best thing is I saw this video and it looked kind of like a bad rip. Somebody's got a camera in a theater or something. And I watched the whole thing and I'm crying, laughing. And then it zooms out and you realize that this is being shown to the press. By the president before he came out.
The best part is no one
He did
knew
that
what
on
it
purpose.
was. It was supposed to be the press conference where Trump was going to come out and announce how the meeting had gone, and so the press was all there waiting for him to come out, and this video just starts playing, and they're all sitting there did the North Koreans take over the projection equipment and are starting to play some of their propaganda? What is this? And wasn't until it started to play again, this time in English, that they went, wait, that doesn't seem like what the North Koreans would have done.
It's so bad.
And then Trump came out and was like,
So there's great propaganda. It's fun to watch. Everyone should watch it as
Really.
It's
Get
very
giggle out of
transparent
it.
propaganda. But
it's okay, because in the QA afterwards, one of the reporters asked Trump, "Are you concerned the video you just showed could be used by Kim as propaganda to show him as?" And then they got interrupted by Trump saying, "No, I'm not concerned at all. We can use that video for other countries." See, nothing to worry about. We can use that video for other countries.
What?
I don't know what that statement means or how it's.
No.
I don't even
that's what what he
know
said.
what he meant.
No.
Yep, they're just going to cut Un out and put someone else in.
I'm not
and
sure. I'm not
change the flags.
Like,
It's pretty
is that,
simple.
or is it like he thought that like we'll just show that video to other countries and like they'll be like, oh, see, it makes North Korea look like a bunch of asses? Like, what? I
No,
don't even understand what he thought was
I know what he means. I know what he means. Are you
Right?
ready?
Okay, no,
Yeah,
I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not ready.
This is what's gonna happen.
What
He's
do you
gonna
got?
cut out all the stuff that's specific to North Korea, and then he's gonna put in Russia, and then he's gonna put in some other country that he wants to
course.
make good with.
China.
He's using it as a template.
See, I'm not sure if
You're just
he,
gonna
like,
plug in the
has-
country you're trying to make
I'm
nice
not sure
with.
he's thought through it that much.
Oh, he definitely has.
No.
I'm positive now. I'm convinced.
So beyond all of that, we actually had the summit itself, and these people talked, and they came to nothing. Actually, no agreements were made. Although no statements were made, an affirmation was made, in air quotes agreement was made, and that agreement is not worth the paper it was put on, as it actually doesn't state any solid dates, any actual deliverables. It just says that they will work to denuclearization, but not of North Korea, of the Korean Peninsula,
Which is the same thing they always say.
which is what they've said forever.
Yes.
Which does mean we're not getting rid of ours until you get yours out of South Korea.
No, I do want to say I disagree with your statement that that statement was completely empty and didn't actually have
Devoid of any meaning.
Yeah, see, I disagree with that because the one thing it did do was say that the U.S. was committing to suspend joint military exercises with South Korea.
Yes. Well, yeah, but that got us the prisoner releases though. So that, I mean, there was a little bit of stuff back and forth there.
It was the
Right.
solid portion of it.
They
It's just,
still won that one, though.
Oh,
they definitely won that
massively,
one. Like,
massively.
Trump claims to be good at negotiating,
No,
but no, he sucks at it really badly.
Just trashed here. Seriously.
So, and then he gave the playbook to Kim beforehand. Like, here's how you're going to negotiate with me. Now come negotiate with me. I mean, Rodman actually gave Kim the art of the deal and then sent him into a room with Trump, basically. Like, all right, so study this so you beat him. Like, I mean, this is kind of crazy.
Well, I mean, the sad thing is we've already seen multiple examples where Trump walked into a room with a world leader and said something to the effect of, all right, I really need this to give me a win. So all I need is to be able to go out of there and say that I got that thing. What do I need to get you on board with that? He doesn't care if like the thing was actually anything meaningful. It can be like he needs the president of Mexico to not go out there and say, we're not paying for that fucking wall. He needs him to say literally anything but that.
Yeah.
And the president of Mexico goes, the hell you say? And he goes, please, pretty please, I really need this. And then it's like the that episode of Futurama where Zap Brannigan actually on the space Titanic, cries until Leela sleeps with him. Except Trump isn't that effective. He just does the crying.
I mean, he is roughly that gross.
Yeah, and I mean, if you've ever seen the thing of Billy West reading Trump tweets in the voice of Zap Brannigan.
What? Oh, I need to see this now.
It's amazing. But, I think one of the worst parts of it was Trump's complete dismissals of the actual human rights violations under the Kim regime, saying that, he's a tough guy and saying, quote, that he's done some bad things, but a lot of other people have done some really bad things. I could go through a lot of nations where a lot of bad things were done. I mean,
and that was in a direct response to being asked
about the human rights violations.
Yeah, like he's a killer, he's executing people, and his response is, he's a tough guy. Hey, when you take over a country, tough country with tough people, and you take over it from your father, I don't care who you are, what you are, how much of an advantage you have. If you can do that at 27 years old, that's 1 in 10,000 that could do that. So he's a very smart guy. He's a great negotiator, and I think we understand each other. Like, doesn't care in the slightest about the human rights violations, just hand waves them away. And then arguably more insultingly, like as awful as of a human being as that makes him, the fact that he thinks that, taking over a country from your father, who was the iron-fisted ruler of the country, means that like you're some sort of brilliant person that like no one else could do that.
Oh, hey, come on.
Well, his brother didn't get it. His brother got removed from the country, so
Well-
he was at least smarter than that guy.
And
Yeah,
he
but
had
I
to
mean-
murder at least a couple uncles, didn't he?
Yeah, but I mean,
That's the tough guy part.
when you're born into that family and like one of you is going to be the person that ends up in charge, like it's
The
not
tough guy gets the job.
It's also, that's 1 in 10,000 that could do that. No, it's roughly 1 in 3 because they
Yeah.
presumably had like 3 kids.
Right.
Like it's a little higher.
We
odds.
did learn, I think personally, what Trump's actual intentions were here. When he, so there was a half hour before they actually came out and did the lunch and then did the longer talks and they came up with their, in air quotes here again, agreement. And in that half hour, supposedly Trump talked to Kim about their beautiful beachfronts and all the missiles and ammunition they fire over them in videos that we all get to watch because they put out all that propaganda. And said that, this would be great beachfront property to put hotels and resorts at. And you guys, could have a thriving economy based on that. So to me, the actual North Korea talks for Trump are a real estate deal.
Yes. Which
He is making a real
basically
estate play. We will see a Trump tower and a Trump resort casino on the beach.
Didn't you call this a while back? I seem to remember there
I
being
did.
Yeah.
You will find in an episode from nearly a year ago where I said that Trump was going to make a real estate play in North Korea.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it looks like that's what he's doing.
Nailed it.
I mean, and like somehow, for something that lasted like not even 24 hours, you'd think we would have exhausted all of the news about this conference. They didn't actually reach any meaningful deal, but Trump gave away the farm and got fuck all in return. Trump didn't give a shit about the human rights violations. Trump, did this insane propaganda video. Like, how much more could there possibly be, right? Like, there's no way there's more to this story.
Sure, but then Trump salutes a North Korean general.
I mean,
Then he salutes a North Korean general. Saluting the enemy. That is
literally
not...
a high-ranking enemy officer of a hostile country. Yeah.
That's not actually a thing you're supposed to do.
That's not a thing you do?
No.
No, that is
Oh.
bad.
Yeah, that's really not a good look, especially given that, of course, the reason we found out about it was because state media for North Korea immediately started using it in their propaganda.
Now, are they
Yes.
saying like how great Trump is? Now he's gonna,
Oh yeah,
get
now
America back
now some of the North
on our
Korean
side?
state media is actually referring to him as supreme leader,
Jesus
Yes,
Christ.
they
which
are
makes him, I
calling
believe,
Trump...
him the only non-North Korean leader to get that appellation from them.
North
North Korea is calling Trump the supreme leader. That is their thing. Of
the
the
two
United
supreme
States.
leaders meet, stuff like that. Yeah.
So when we were watching the coverage of this, and Dennis Rodman is there with his Potcoin T-shirt and his
Of
MAGA
course.
hat and his sunglasses on TV. Why are you doing that? And it's Chris Cuomo who was interviewing him, I think.
Might have been. Sounds
I think
right.
I've
Yeah, it
seen
was.
Just we looked at his face and like that is the most I am in the wrong timeline face I've ever seen in my life, and I know how he feels.
Yeah.
I feel it every day now. It really like crypto coin. What is going on with North Korea? Insane celebrities should not be allowed to do any of this stuff. It's just like everything in one image.
Yeah. Now, speaking of like everything wrong in one image, somehow we still haven't exhausted everything Trump managed to fuck up here. Because it turns out that he started giving interviews after the meeting.
Who let him do that?
Someone with really bad judgment.
Put him back in the crate.
Right? No, instead he told George Stephanopoulos while talking about the summit and Kim Jong-un, quote, "His country does love him. His people, you see the fervor. They have a great fervor." And then, of course, like, you would expect from at least the bare minimum of a journalist talking with someone that says something like that, he's asked, how can you possibly say that about someone who tortures and murders his citizens? And he replies, quote, George, I'm given what I'm given, okay? I mean, this is what we have, and this is where we are, and I can only tell you from my experience, and I met him, I've spoken with him, and I've met him.
Okay.
I don't even know what else attempting to convey, except for the fact that he has met Kim Jong-un, and that his country loves him.
No.
Which is such a mess up.
Why is he allowed to speak?
That's a good question.
This is the feeling that the British had to have while King George was in charge. Like, you're crazy. Please stop. Just stop. Just put him in a corner somewhere. Yes, we have to have a king, but can you just not?
But, I think the capstone came a little later. It was a news conference after the meeting. Actually, I don't remember the order on whether that was before or after the interview, but it was after the meeting. I think it may have been before the George Stephanopoulos interview. But he was he goes up and he's asked about whether he, really believes what Kim Jong-un has said. And his response was strangely self-aware for a moment. He actually said, quote, honestly, I think he's going to do these things. I may be wrong. I may stand before you in 6 months and say, hey, I was wrong. I don't know that I'll ever admit that, but I'll find some kind of an excuse.
It's mind-blowing.
I'm sure that he thought he was,
he thinks that's endearing.
He thought that was funny.
Yeah, he thought that was, well, sure, it was actually the thing he's going to do because obviously it is. It's what he always does. But like from his perspective, saying that makes it a joke, even though he wasn't really kidding about whether he was going to do that or not. The joke is just that he says it. Like, but that was very weird to have that moment where he like acknowledges that A, he's going to do that. B, he's not actually going to admit that he did that, but that he'll make an excuse to justify the fact that he did exactly that. Normally, I just don't expect to see that level of self-awareness from him. Normally, he just like pretends like it never happened in the first place.
You know who comes out of this smelling like roses? Cameramen who defected the second. They are the only ones.
That is about right.
Wow. So Trump and North Korea, thanks to Dennis Rodman. I just, how did we get here?
Somebody was mentioning that they turned on the Large Hadron Collider in 2008, which, I'm willing to reset to 2008. How about you guys?
That doesn't sound like it could be worse than the situation now, so... What, we're going to screw up the intervening period worse than we already did?
Well, now we move on to more Trump because that's moving on these days. Because there's just so many
another
topics.
Scandal of his that was in the news this week due to new revelations.
So the New York Attorney General, Barbara Underwood, sued President Donald Trump, 3 of his adult children, Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, and Ivanka Trump, and their charitable foundation Thursday, claiming, quote, a pattern of persistent illegal conduct, end quote, for more than a decade.
Now, it's fun because even though they specified more than a decade, a bunch of the actual complaints that were laid out were very specifically about extensive unlawful political coordination with the Trump presidential campaign. So they were like, yeah, for the last decade, they were doing all this illegal shit, but then they got serious by getting involved in politics too. And it turns out that, well, according to what the New York Attorney General said, this was a charity like Trump University was an educational institution. They board of directors apparently existed in name only, having never met after 1999 and never once approving any of the grants. Those were all just done by Donald Trump himself. And it turns out that they found that the Trump Foundation was basically just a checkbook for payments from Mr. Trump or his businesses to nonprofits
Mostly
regardless,
lately to help his campaign.
Yeah, like the time that they actually had Cory Lewandowski write an email to the foundation to cut a $100,000 check to the Marine Corps Law Enforcement Foundation right after the media started inquiring about Trump's charitable donations. And then a check got sent to them the exact same day, even though Cory Lewandowski was the campaign manager for the Trump campaign and had absolutely fuck all to do with the Trump Foundation. There was also things like, you remember that time that Donald Trump decided not to participate in one of the TV debates with other Republican candidates and instead held like a charity fundraiser for veterans in Iowa? Well, it turns out that they got like $2.8 million at that event.
Wow.
And that money was basically used to promote Trump's campaign for the presidency, specifically the Iowa caucuses.
That is super illegal.
Well, that's what the veterans wanted, I'm sure.
Some of them probably.
Yeah, no, that is not how nonprofits work.
Yeah.
This one's big trouble. The IRS especially does not like nonprofits being fucked with.
No, and it sounds like they just straight up from day one were just using this as their cover for whatever they felt like doing at the moment.
No, I mean, this thing's been famously not a nonprofit the entire time.
Look, just because they were using it to go to a charity art auctions to buy portraits of Donald Trump so that he could hang them in the Trump Tower doesn't mean it wasn't a charity. It just means it was a really awful charity that wasn't doing anything charitable and violates all of the U.S. statutes about how charities are supposed to operate.
I believe that makes it not a charity, sir.
You may have a point there.
Yeah, well, hooray for attorney generals sticking it to Trump.
And hooray for the pardon power of the presidency not extending to state charges.
Yeah, I'm exhausted, and I have no interest in the rest of the swamp we could be digging into.
What? But there's the weekly feature on Scott Pruitt and how he's in the awful news this week.
Oh wait,
because we covered that for 6 weeks in a row now.
Wait, I've got it. Scott Pruitt's a dick. He did something super illegal. He's gonna go to jail, but probably only for 6 months.
Okay, one thing we do have to say,
okay, what is
there
it?
is hilarious, is that Scott Pruitt's longtime ally and mentor, Senator James Snowball Inhofe, James the shitheel.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
James Inhofe went on Laura Ingraham's show and basically put an ultimatum out there. He said, quote, "I see these things. They upset me as much as they upset you. And I think that something needs to happen to change that. One of those alternatives would be for him to leave that job." And then a little while later, he said, "Every day something new comes out. So I've kind of taken the position that if that doesn't stop, I'm going to be forced to be in a position where I'm going to say, well, Scott, you're not doing your job." And hopefully that would change.
Maybe that time
The
should have happened
strongest he could say is, well,
ago.
Scott.
I mean, this is James Inhofe. He doesn't disagree with Scott Pruitt on any of the awful policy stuff or gutting the EPA. He's 100% supportive of that. And yet Scott Pruitt is still so bad just due to the corruption that even James Inhofe is like, I'm starting to think maybe I'm not okay with this.
That moment when you're at your Southern Pride rally and you notice that there's a Nazi next to you.
And he looks over and he goes, I feel like you're going a little bit too far, dude.
Guys, maybe
Tone it down.
Maybe not the 14 words.
Yeah.
Ugh.
No, yes, we could talk once again about how shitty Scott Pruitt is because there's always new things. But we're at the point where his own awful mentor is like, I think that guy may need to go.
Yeah, that's a
new low even by his standards.
Swap. Scott, just quit already. I'd say quit while you're ahead, but just quit. Just quit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is us for the evening. Again, I would like to remind the world that thanks to Dennis Rodman, Donald Trump met with the leader of North Korea. That is the timeline you live in now. Accept it.
bad Mad
And,
Libs for headlines.
Once you've accepted it, realize the only thing you can do to change it is voting. Or the thing that we're never going to pull off. So don't even worry about it. None of us are armed enough to fight the U.S. government. So, so that's episode 61, everyone. Good night.
Thank you for listening. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GreggHoush Show and on Instagram at GreggHoush. If you like what you've heard and want to be a part of it, check out patreon.com/GreggHoush Show. In exchange for funding our programming, you gain access to exclusive content such as uncut editions of our podcast. We have new episodes every Thursday night. We hope you listen in. The GreggHoush Show was created by GreggHoush, executive produced by co-host Eric Gaures, and co-hosted by Kayla Avery. Other contributors include producer and writer Anna Jeffrey, co-host producer David McGuffin, and writer-engineer Robert Tortora. Theme music for this show was produced and recorded by Geneva de Colbert. Our interns include co-host Casey McLaughlin, writer-engineer Alec Greeny, writer Maddie Locicero, and associate producer, writer, and announcer William Kennedy. You're listening to New Revolutionary Radio, your call to action.